Hello everybody and welcome to lesson 5 of the Color Gemstone Academy. It is part 3 of the 4 C's. Remember the 4 C's are the color, the cut, the clarity, carat weight. So part 3 is going to be dealing with clarity of a gemstone. And that's a very important factor, and very few gemstones will be completely free and clear of any inclusions or imperfections. Now, speaking of inclusions, a couple years ago, or I don't know exactly when it was, the GIA, Gemological Institute of America, decided that we didn't like the word inclusions or blemishes anymore. So now we came up with a term called clarity characteristics. What are the clarity characteristics of the stone? But for the purpose of me explaining to you, I'm still going to use the word inclusions and blemishes because it really helps make, kind of tell the story. As I said, very few gems are completely free of those blemishes or those inclusions. And if they are, it's a major factor in the value of the stone. So blemishes would be something that's on the surface of a gemstone, like a scratch on the outside, and that can certainly detract from the value of a gemstone. Now that scratch, you have to remember, we talked back in an earlier lesson about the Mohs scale of hardness, different gems can scratch another gem. So if you sit there and throw things into a drawer and your sapphire is hitting your amethyst, well, it can scratch that. So a blemish would be something that would be on the exterior of that stone. Now an inclusion, clarity characteristic, will be something like a fracture that would be inside the stone. Now the important thing to remember about each of those, you don't want either of those to happen in your gemstone, although it's inevitable in most gemstones. But if you have something that's a surface thing like a scratch, like the blemish we talked about, that's something that could probably be polished out and it wouldn't have an effect on the durability of the stone. However, if what you have is a crack or fracture inside that stone, that inclusion, not only does that detract from the value of the stone, it can actually make that stone less durable. And I like to give an analogy with the human body. If we have a blemish on the outside of our skin, like acne, or maybe you have a scar, I have plenty of those on my face, goodness knows. Well, that's maybe not going to be something that you want to have happen on the outside of your skin, but it's not going to probably affect the durability of you and your ability to live longer. However, if you have sort of a hidden inside defect, like high blood pressure or some sort of cancer cell, that would obviously have a huge effect on your durability and longevity. Well, the same is true of gemstones. That blemish on the outside isn't going to affect maybe the durability or long-term health of the gemstone, but something inside could be an accident waiting to happen. Now, since we talked about clarity, there are 3 basic levels of clarity of a gemstone. There's transparent, there is translucent, and then there is opaque. Now, I describe it in this way. A translucent gemstone, in this case, I'm going to give you a look at a citrine. Okay, and that's just a faceted citrine. That would be an example of a transparent gem, or an amethyst, or hopefully your sapphire ruby would be transparent as well. And I describe it like a pane of window glass. You can see right through it, and everything behind that pane of glass, if the lighting is proper, you'll be able to see that. Then we get into translucent. And translucent would be like an opal, or even, I'm going to show you in a little bit of our Larimar a bit later. A translucent gem is where some of the light passes through, but you can't necessarily see what's behind it. I equate that to a lot of shower curtains that you use in your home. A shower curtain or a glass in a bathroom might be a frosted glass, or the shower door might be frosted, or your shower curtain might be translucent. So you can see the shape behind it, but you can't really see somebody's birthday suit body. So that would be an example of translucent. And then opaque, I give that example as a brick wall. It's or any solid wall. You can't see through it. Whatever's happening behind there, you can't see it. Like an opaque gemstone, like an something like an onyx. Or some turquoise, where light won't pass through the stone at all. So I'm going to give you some real life examples of that. And again, let's go back to this transparent stone. Now this is, even though it's faceted, now obviously a better idea would be something that is a step cut, But even though this is faceted, I did, and I'm gonna show you on the screen right now. I took a video of putting this over print in my book on the word transparent, and you'll be able to read every letter of transparent right through that citrine. And then what I like to give is an example of a translucent, and there are a lot of examples of them. Now it's bright out here, but you're still going to be able to see it. This is just your common flashlight, so leave that on. And what you see is that light is passing through that. So I turn it off, I turn it on, and you can see that. Now leaving that light on, I'll give you a little bit of rough turquoise. So this is turquoise. And when I pass the light behind this, no light gets through that. That would be an example of a gemstone that is opaque. So those are the 3 levels of transparency of a gemstone that you need to know. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into a section that I call, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a noise? Well, I'm going to say the same thing about clarity. If you can look at a gemstone and your eye can't see any imperfections, do they exist in that stone? Stay tuned, I'll talk about that next. Okay, we are still talking about clarity, the 3rd of the 4 C's that are important in gemstones. Now, I mentioned a moment ago something about a tree falling in the forest. And here's why I talk about that during this lesson. It's what I call eye clean versus the loupe or the jeweler's microscope. Now, what do I mean by eye clean? A lot of times you can look at a gemstone, and if you can see no inclusions with the naked eye, that's what they would determine as an eye clean stone. Also, another important thing I'm going to talk about is disclosure, so remember that. But let's talk about the loupe, and you might have seen something like this. In fact, we wear it around our necks sometimes when we walk around during shows. This is called a jeweler's loupe. And you bring the stone up to your eye and you look at it, and this is a 10 power magnification jeweler's loupe. Now, a jeweler can also use a gem microscope, and that microscope might be a 10 power, but it may be able to go up to 200 power in that microscope. So what's important to know about that? Well, there's something called, and you need to know this, if you ever walk into a jewelry store, if you're sort of intimidated by walking in because you feel like they know a lot more than you do, first of all, if you watch this class in its entirety, the Colored Gemstone Academy, you're going to know as much as most of the people behind the counter in the store, and you'll go in very confidently. But there's a thing called disclosure. I used to joke about this on the air when I was selling gems on shopping channels, where I said, if you want to have a lot of fun, let's say you're shopping for turquoise, and go in and ask the person behind the counter, hey, I have a question for you. Has this turquoise been stabilized? And you see them get a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe they don't even know the answer to the question because they're not the one who mined it. And the truth of the matter is, you're supposed to disclose everything it is that you know about a gemstone. And that's why I always talk about what it means to stabilize turquoise and why that's a good word and it's not a bad word. Well, the same is true about what imperfections might be there on a 10 power magnification loupe or in a microscope. So the reason 10 power is the standard in the industry. Like if you're going to say this is a D color flawless diamond, they're going to say that under a 10 magnification loupe or microscope, they could find absolutely no inclusions or imperfections or clarity characteristics in that stone. Now, the question is, well, why don't you go to 20? Why don't you go to 30? Why don't you go to 40? Well, the reason you don't go to 20, 30, or 40 is the standard that's recognized in the industry is a 10 power magnification. So if you don't have any flaws or inclusions under 10 power, why go looking for more? Because again, the responsibility is that you need to disclose it. So just keep that in mind, and don't be afraid to ask questions when you're in a jewelry store or to ask me, because we are obligated by law to the Federal Trade Commission to disclose what's out there. So that's that 10 powerful magnification. So that's why I say if a tree falls in the forest and you can't, and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a noise? Well, the answer is of course yes. But if I can't see a clarity characteristic under 10 power magnification, don't go looking for trouble. Okay? Now, clarity and value. Not all gems are, how does it affect the value of the gemstone? Well, obviously, as clean and clear as a gem can be is really the ideal. That's what you're looking for. But is there ever a case where an inclusion or a clarity characteristic be a positive in a gemstone? Well, the answer is absolutely yes, it can be. For example, diamonds have a cubic structure when the crystal is growing. Every gem has a, there's science in gemology, chemical composition, the crystal structure. So diamond is cubic. That means it has 4 sides to the crystal. Well, there's another gem that has 4 sides to the crystal called a garnet. And there are times, and I'll show you an example on the screen, where they found a garnet growing inside of a diamond crystal. So you can see it clear as day, that red, and that is a garnet. That actually makes that gem more valuable. It's kind of, I equate it to, like if you have a stamp, and a lot of times they have like a double print stamp, or if you're a stamp collector, coin collector, where it actually enhances the value of the stone. The same is true having that garnet inside a diamond. Now, how about a sapphire or a ruby? We think of a sapphire or ruby if it's a great color and it's really, really clear, it increases the value. And then you think if something is kind of opaque or even translucent, maybe it's not going to have as good a value. Well, that may be true unless it becomes a sapphire or ruby that has what we call asterism. Now, asterism is that star effect. If you've ever seen a star ruby or a star sapphire, like you're seeing on your screen now, well, that actually enhances the value because it's a hexagonal crystal, so it shows 6 sides, and if you have the perfect star ruby or sapphire, it's going to have 6 rays or 6 tentacles to that star. So that would be another positive example. Another one that I like, because it's still not an overly expensive stone, if you've ever heard of something called rutilated quartz, I'm going to show you this rutilated quartz crystal where you see all of these little needle-like inclusions that are gold in color. And that's called rutile. And rutile is actually the material where titanium comes from, but those needles exist in that quartz crystal, and that is again a positive. Now there's another one that's a little bit more confusing, where you see those black needles in there on your screen right now. Well, that's not a rutilated quartz. A lot of people think, well, it is. That's actually a tourmalinated quartz. That means tourmaline. There's black tourmaline growing inside of that clear quartz crystal, but again, enhances the value. Now another example would be, again, we think of inclusions as bad. There's a type of garnet that's a green garnet called a demantoid garnet. Now, the demantoid garnet is a green garnet, and sometimes you will see what looks like a horsetail feather-like inclusion inside that stone. Collectors go crazy over something like that. Normally you think, listen, I want my green garnet, which is rare enough to begin with, to be completely clear, but that horsetail actually adds to the value of that. Another example, turquoise. We think of turquoise, Sleeping Beauty. Boy, was that the standard, right? We had no visible inclusions. It was that robin's egg blue color, and it was just perfect. Well, that's actually not the most valuable, believe it or not. You can see some beautiful blue colored turquoise that has a spider web matrix in black, and that gets literally thousands of dollars a carat for something like that kind of turquoise. And another one that I really like, and I'll talk about in another lesson, and it's really not a hugely valuable stone, but I love labradorite. And I used to go to the shows and I would buy these, a pallet of these emu, or a flat I should say, of these emu eggs they called it, that were in labradorite. And it was interesting to me that a couple of them had very distinct shapes in that labradorescence. One was a shark. It looked like a swimming shark. I'll try and photograph it for you. I don't know if it'll photograph well. And another one had a cross in it. And again, happened naturally by nature. And even though it's not the most expensive stone, I don't want to part with those. I don't want to give those or sell those up because that's something very special to me. So that is really, I think, all that you need to know about our lesson on the third of the 4 C's. I haven't decided what we're going to do for our lesson after this. I usually give you a little, you know what I think I'll do? I'm going to take you back down to Brazil And we're going to talk a little bit about a gem that's near and dear to my heart called drusy. So stick around. We'll do a little mini course on drusy right after this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell for notifications when the next class will drop, which will be 1 week from today. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching the Color Gemstone Academy. Hi everybody, and you're watching the Color Gemstone Academy. My name is Paul Deasy, and my YouTube channel is Paul Deasy Gemstones. Well, I thought I'd take you on another little journey back to Brazil, like we did with the amethyst, and talk about a different gemstone out there that I've always thought was amazing, and it's called drusy. Now, what is drusy? Drusy is not really a specific gemstone. Most of the drusy that I've ever dealt with in my life comes from mines in Brazil, and we'll take you to an agate mine because that's what we're looking for. So when agates are forming, generally they're forming in a solid like this, and it might create something. In fact, we call this a tuxedo agate because it has black and white stripes that are running through that, and that's generally what they find when they're mining agate, a solid piece that they could cut off in slabs and create that. But notice this one has a hole inside, and a certain percentage of geodes that form will have a hole or a cavity inside of it, and that gives the opportunity for something to fill that space. So there's you probably can't see with the lighting here, but there's these little crystals, quartz crystals, that started to grow on top of that agate surface, and that's what drusy is. So we talked about the 4 C's and the color, the clarity, the carat weight, but I'd like to talk about a 5th C when it comes to drusy, and that's coverage. What you're looking for is that kind of even amount of coverage of these little drusy crystals. And the reason I love and I think it's such an affordable luxury is when you think about diamonds and things that cost a lot of money, when light hits those drusy crystals, and there's so many of them, it's really a lot of bling for the buck. I really like the way that that sparkles. Now, there's also a way that you can get a bunch of different colors and shapes as you cut the drusy. Now, this is a fleur-de-lis. You probably recognize that shape. But notice that is a gold color. Well, that's not a natural color that drusy comes in. Or I sometimes have done little dolphin pieces, and notice that's all blue crystals on there. Or even something like, well, we got a little smaller, actually, ooh, this is a big one. Like that. This is what I call the big old sleeping drusy, where the drusy crystals grew so big they're on their side. Or something in that kind of white color like that. Well, that's a different conversation altogether in drusy, because most drusy is treated with something called chemical vapor deposition. I know that sounds very complicated, but it's really not. They have this, and I can show you some footage of that when we visited the factory that cuts the drusy. They have these little, almost look like ovens, that you put in the drusy. And by introducing another element in there, it can change the color or put a coating on top of that drusy. They call it chemical vapor deposition, because by putting that, so like for example, when I showed you this fleur-de-lis, they put this in, they put a bunch of pieces in that little airtight chamber, and then they heat gold up to a very high temperature until it becomes a vapor. And that vapor gets deposited, thus the name chemical vapor deposition, on top of the drusy. So it gives it gold, and they're actually using gold, so it makes it very expensive. In the case of this one, they're using platinum. They have a platinum disc that costs a lot of money, but they can do a lot of different pieces and coat that. That's a coating of like a white platinum on top of that. In the case of the blue, like we talked about with our dolphin, where'd our dolphin go? They use cobalt, so they can play around with these different elements. And when you see something called mystic drusy, they're actually using titanium, and that's why you get that multicolor effect, that rainbow effect in drusy. It's a really fun gemstone. It's one that I'm going to try and get back into and start providing more of that for you because I just have always loved it. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about what drusy is and where it comes from. And it's really a kind of an affordable luxury. So I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, next week we're going to be on to lesson 6, which is the final part of the 4 C's, and that will be the carat weight. I look forward to seeing you all then, 1 week from today. Thanks for watching.